Okay, welcome. I'm Catherine Brunch of Canine Support, and thank you for joining us today as we start our 50 years of Tellington TTouch celebrations. Today, I am absolutely honoured to be joined by Robyn Hood, co-founder of TTouch, senior instructor, and Linda Tellington-Jones's younger sister. So welcome, Robyn. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
And we're starting off December with all about 50 years of TTouch, and I thought who better to come in and explain what is Tellington TTouch, because
Right.
when people ask me, I'm always like, how long have you got? Because it's so big. But you are so good at kind of condensing it into a more simpler version for people to understand. So if you can just kind of start off, how would you describe Tellington TTouch?
It's like the $64,000 question. And I think you're right, Catherine. There are so many components to it. And it really started off 50 years ago with Linda looking to see if she could help horses bring more awareness to horses and help them learn how to learn. And that was a really, really important part for her. So it started out with that really, basic observation. Like, can we just pay attention to small things that our dogs or horses or cats, whatever it is, are doing? Because when we live with animals every day, it's really hard to see things. And I know because I used to travel a lot, I'd come home and I could look at the horses and say, oh, they're losing or gaining weight more easily than when people are here every day. So there was the observation. And then, of course, she started to integrate some body work, which she didn't really think she could teach at the time. So there's that component of just techniques, and there's so many different techniques that we can use, and they're based on what is acceptable for the animal. And I think that's also, it's the good part and the bad part about TTouch, because the good part is we pay attention and listen to the animals. The bad part is we have so many choices. And if we just had a rote system, it would be easier for a lot of people. And then, of course, because of the Feldenkrais technique for humans in terms of the awareness through movement, it was how do we explore small movement exercises, not chasing the horse around, not, or the dogs, not pressuring them into doing things, but how can we help them use their bodies more functionally? How can we help them to, in a way, learn to have more this concept we talk about balance of physical, emotional, and mental balance, which are all connected. Then, of course, we started to find out what tools can we add to help them, like the body wraps and the balance leash and different harnesses and so on. So we had the equipment component of it. And I would say that overall for me, and then of course there's the feedback, which is pay attention, stop, pause what you're doing and see, what does the animal do? Do they re-engage? Do they walk away? And walking away is totally acceptable. And so it's giving them, again, more choice, because choice is really paramount in what we do. And I honestly feel like the longer that I do this, the more that I feel that the philosophy of the work is, in a way, the overriding and in a way the most important part, because the techniques are really, really useful. We know that for sure. Changing our attitude towards our animals, changing the way that we react to what they do, not taking things personally, understanding that behavior is a form of communication, is a huge part. So what is TTouch? Well, it's a component. It's a gentle way of making a connection with an animal, and also in changing your relationship. And that's the one thing that I see and I hear from so many people, is that their relationship has changed. And I think that most of us have animals in our lives that to enrich our lives, but we also want to enrich theirs. And so I think that that's a really, really, really important part. So you can take any of the components of it, and it can make a difference in terms of what you're doing, whether it's making it easier for your animal to go to the vet. When we put in, I actually have a little dog that has a scratch on her cornea, and she's quite nervous of the vet, and she's quite nervous about everything. And so I was actually I was using treats, which didn't really help that much because she didn't like the drop so much. But what I actually found is that if I just call her over, I tell her what I need to do, And I, just tell her it has to be done. I'm sorry. And then put the drop in her eye. It's much better than trying to restrain her in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that bit about the relationship, improving the relationship with your dog is that when I first started out learning T-Touch, that was what I needed to do. I needed to change the relationship with my with Keto. We'd lost Jinx. It was just the two of us, and it just wasn't the same. And we needed to kind of rebond, just the two of us, and learn about each other kind of all over again. And I think what I love as well, we're doing this all with the animals, with the dogs, is that my clients come back and go, Josh, I learned so much about my dog, but I learned so much about me as well. And that's like, yes, that's exactly it, because it's not just about training your dog. It's about actually how can you build on yourself and change things within yourself to support your dog better too, isn't it? It's a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that whole thing of people coming, it's not really about the dog, it's about me, right? And I know that Linda takes a real kind of spiritual side to it. And for me, it's the spiritual side is what people get out of it. It's whatever they get out of it for themselves. And I think the work really speaks to so many people because they maybe have had that feeling as a child of how the relationship they wanted to have with an animal. And then as we go older and we get, there's been different ways of people working with dogs, and it's just make them do it. They're being dominant. They're, all of that kind of stuff. Even when people didn't feel that was right, they didn't feel that that resonated with them. And so when they find something that kind of resonates with them, and it isn't that, like it's also about being effective, because we bring animals into our lives, and so we have to set fair boundaries for them, because none of us get to do what we want all the time. I mean, that's just the reality of life. So how can we make it more fair to them? How can we enrich the quality of their lives? And I responded to a local Facebook post about somebody looking for a trainer to help them with their dog who barks and when they see other dogs as they're walking, and she knows she just wants to engage, but she wants to stop the habit. And my response was, and the challenge we have in this area is luckily we have some really good positive reinforcement trainers, but we have a lot of old school, and they went from using a pitch collar to a shock collar and so on. So and I said, you want to consider non-aversive methods so that your relationship is good, and consider, are you meeting the needs of your dog? And I think that's so critical. And I know it can be difficult for people when their dogs probably spend a lot of time alone. Do they have engagement with other dogs, with other people, in an enriched environment, or never do they? And I don't know. I feel like we also have to be really fair to animals.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, enriching their lives and meeting their needs is so important, because they're sentient beings as well. They have feelings and emotions. And just like we like to continually learn, they also do enjoy it as well, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So next question. Let's kind of lead on, because we talked about other dog trainers. How sort of in what way is T-Touch different from just positive reinforcement training?
I would say that I don't consider myself a dog trainer. I live in a farm, and so dogs have to have a level of obedience that they have to come when they're called, and they have to not chase the other animals, and and they have to get along and so on. And how did I do that? It's just part of it is an attitude of what I expect. And I think the pictures we make are really important. So the thing about T-Touch melds really well for a lot of people that are dog trainers, because I mean, for one thing is you can't train nervousness out of a dog, no matter how positive you are. You can't exercise hyperactivity out of a dog. So I think that this is where oftentimes the touches, and this is not about forcing your dog to have, this is going to be good for you, so you have to put up with it. And that's why we have so many ways. There's this concept of, people are talking about now, oh, you need to get consent from your dog to touch them all the time. I'd say also find a way that your dog likes to be touched. And what I see so often is people like, the rufflers, and that, hey, you're such a good dog. And then they wonder why their dogs are either super aroused or aren't really comfortable about approaching people. They don't know that those people that they don't know are not going to touch them the same way that their person is, that they do know that they may only put up with because they really have a relationship, but it's not necessarily the most beneficial for them. So I think that what we see is that the TTouch can help animals be more trainable. And I think a huge part of that is about relationship, but it's also about kind of enhancing their awareness and their ability to learn and their ability to be able to take on information.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit before we started pressing record about how many different dog trainers are out there, and the positive reinforcement stuff, the not so good stuff, and why might people start to be drawn more to TTouch, because they might get stuck where the positive reinforcement and the treats have stopped working, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Well, and of late, I've had numerous really successful dog trainers, and they've had a dog. Usually, it's that they have a dog of their own that they've kind of reached a sort of a plateau with, and it's really helped them with using a lot of food in terms of positive reinforcement. It's just that I see a lot of them that I would say the dogs have really trained the people well. So they've kind of, it's stopped some of the behavior, but it actually hasn't, because the dogs have just changed their routine about what they do. So it's helped for sure, but then they are afraid to move their dogs on a little bit from it because they don't really know how to do it. And these are really good trainers who have studied a lot and done a lot of different things. And so it's about helping them come into a different sort of a kind of balance with it. And as I was saying, that I just taught some in-person classes, and I think that one of the ways that TTouch pretty much is different than anything in terms of dog training is when we do our in-person trainings, all the dogs come and they're there for 6 hours, like for a day or maybe 2 days, or in some case 3 or 4 days. It used to be 6. So the dog, and we set it up so that the dogs are safe. The dogs do not have to, we do not have them interact with each other. They have a safe space to be, but they get to see other dogs doing things. They get to hear people. They get to actually settle in their environment. And I was thinking about this because I had 40 people and 30 dogs in one training in a room that we were like people to people. And they came from very, very nice pair of dog trainers. And so they knew most of their clients, and they would say, oh, this dog is super reactive about this, and blah, and on and on and on. Because they only see them an hour a week. And so at the end of the second day of these trainings, these dogs that were like so hyper and so were just like chilled. And I don't think dogs get an opportunity to do that because people either avoid ever taking them into that sort of a situation because they don't want to have them go over threshold. That's another thing that I have some challenge with. Like, none of us want to intentionally put our dogs over threshold.
No.
The question is, what do you do if they do go over threshold? That to me is the number one thing. So what do? You just calmly extract them from the situation and remain neutral. It is going to happen. And I think that or what we did is we set up these safe barriers so that the dogs could either see a little bit if they chose to or not. We gave more space. So we know that space is super important. And I just think that we offer such a different experience for dogs. And I remember she came back to the course actually in Australia, but she was so concerned about her dog being over threshold and concerned about the other barking dogs and so on. And I just said, listen, it's your dog. You need to advocate for your dog. And if you think this is too much, how could we make it safer for you and your dog? And so we did that. If it was, and the dog was like so much better. This is a dog that, highly, highly anxious dog, and so much better. So she came back this year because she said the improvement in her dog has been just so significant, and the improvement continues. So it's not just about training them, it's about really changing how they perceive situations and putting them into a situation that you can chunk it down into really small pieces.
And that's how we can really start to change how they feel about stuff, isn't it? We can't train the feelings. It they just have to have that experience. And I think that takes us back to the thing that Linda always says about Moshe Feldenkrais, about the body can learn in one experience if there's no pain or fear of pain.
Mhm.
Is just that's everything, isn't it? It's just offering them the opportunity to have a new experience and nothing go wrong, and and they can walk away if they want to. They have that choice to extract themselves or whatever, and we're also there supporting them, whether that's just stroking the lead or doing a little bit of body work with them. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part of other part of the learning is that we have to take them gently out of their habit,
Mm,
because this whole thing about, habits bypass the thinking part of our brain. That's why they're so easy to do, because if we had to like think about everything all the time, it would be challenging. So the idea that Moshe had is, okay, so this is difficult. Let's take you a little bit into that difficult thing and then take you back to where you feel safe again. And that way we can kind of build on and expand their level and their feeling of comfort. But if we never gently expose them to stress, because I know there's, people say, oh, you should, never, you can't have any stress. Well, you have to have a certain amount of stress in order for learning to take place. But if the stress is too great, then there's a release of ACTH and it blocks learning. So, but no, I don't know how much stress is okay for me or you or any dog. And, but if we can sort of gently say, okay, here would be your, the habitual response to something. So let's not like keep doing that over and over again. Let's change something a little bit. It could be, maybe we put a body wrap on you. Maybe we give more space. Maybe we put some surfaces down. Maybe we put a labyrinth. We do something that's slightly different. And that's when the thinking starts to happen. Because the central pattern generator is the part that bypasses the thinking part of the brain. And that's what habits do. So if their habit is to always do A, then you'll never get anything, but A when you do something. So, and I think that's the challenge for most of us is how can we take them? I mean, fun play, going to someplace fun is stressful.
yeah.
So there is that thing of good stress, you could say, bad stress, too much stress, and so on.
Yeah, it's awesome. And just kind of briefly, because a lot of the time when we talk about T-Touch, people are like, oh yeah, it's that, bodywork stuff.
Yeah.
But what are the kind of main components, would you say, of T-Touch?
Well, I think, the T-Touch, because of course it's calling T-Touch training, is why, of course, that's why people get the idea and they think it's some form of massage that, everything will be okay. So there is the bodywork component, and there's the groundwork component. So really with dogs, you don't have to set up specific elements, but when you're out on a walk, you could weave them between trees. You can have a little pause and you can do a little bit of touch with them in that kind of situation. We might put a body wrap, because whenever we change the context, and that it would be like going to a new place, putting on a body wrap, using a balance leash, whatever it is that we do, it changes the experience. So you can do it once in one way and you change something a little bit and it changes the context. So what we're looking to do is give them new ways of experiencing things. And that's where one of the things that I see with people walking their dogs is that they they're out of balance, and so is their dog. And this, people will say, I've heard this over and saying there's no such thing as the opposition reflex in a dog. What I would say is there is an opposition response. And that is when and it happens to all of us, it bypasses the thinking part of our brain big time. And one of them is us grabbing onto the leash when something happens. We come out of the womb like this. That's why, little babies will grab onto a finger and people can actually almost lift them. So it's very, very, very primitive reflex, us grabbing. So we have to teach ourselves to actually have a give. It's no problem to say, stop, this is the way, this is as far as you get to go, but then you have to give. And it's only on the give that they can actually come into balance. And so if we can teach people, that's the part that I see. I think a lot of people are pretty comfortable with touching their dogs. And so that's where they're really kind of drawn to that sort of component. And if we can teach them about how can we have our dogs be in balance? How can we have our dogs just be able to be, so having dogs be able to just stand and look around or be in a safe space and look at the situation. And that's where and I'm not against the use of food. I have to let you know that I just think food's incredibly powerful. And I think we need to use it other than in a training. If you're training a particular behavior, we need to use it with some discretion. Because I see, dogs that they're kind of there with their person and the person's just constantly feeding them to have it be a new experience. Well, that's one thing. Doesn't change every dog though. And so if we can actually let them, I want to encourage dogs to be able to look and then look away, make a choice to do it on their own. And that can take a little bit of time. But I think that is really important. So that's, I would say that the movement work, which is every time we walk our dog, are we encouraging them to be in balance or out of balance? So I think that's really important.
And with balance, it's not just the physical, standing with their weight evenly distributed rather than pulling into the harness or the lead on the collar, but actually it's that emotional and mental balance as well that's really important, isn't it? That do they feel safe? Are they able to learn at that moment in time as well as just can they physically just be, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would say that most of the time, if I see a dog that is standing, what I would say in balance, where they're relaxed, they're on a loose lead, they're able to kind of look around, that they are emotionally and mentally more likely to be in balance. When you see a dog physically out of balance, that's when, to me, is a really strong indicator. Now, that doesn't mean that they necessarily, if they've been trained to stand in a certain way, that's a different experience than if they're just in a way making a choice to stand it. That's why, I see people, the dog's really in a stressful situation and they ask their dog to sit. Are you kidding me? I mean, and they go, but he knows to sit. Of course he does. He just doesn't feel safe in this situation. And that's where, of course, things like the balance leash, drape it around the neck, whether you have a collar or a harness, get the pressure off their neck or their chest so that they actually can feel safer, because we trap our dogs on leashes, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me laugh because when I take Remy round next door to see my mum, and my mum's got biscuits and she knows mum's got biscuits and she's ready and she really wants to jump, and my mum's like, sit like this, and I'm like, don't wave the treat, that's just gonna make her go.
Right. Right. And you want me to jump? Yeah, I can do that.
And I'm like, don't ask her to sit, she's too excited to sit right now.
Right.
And
Right.
and then on the flip side of that, we've got my rescue dog Chloe, who doesn't know a sit cue. She just doesn't. She doesn't need to. And my mum just goes up and gives her a biscuit. She doesn't even bother asking her to do anything.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
like, just think of Remy like Chloe and just give her the biscuit.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's really funny. So where are we? And so that's kind of TTouch, but I have a couple of questions for you as well, so
Okay.
people can get to know you a little bit better. So you're Linda's younger sister. What drew you to work with her and the TTouch method?
I was born. No, so I didn't really, I mean, that's not totally true because there's 6 kids in our family. And I guess I'm probably our whole family's had horses, like at some point, or maybe not my youngest brother, but they were involved in some way with horses. And but because I rode with like what I started riding before I could walk, and Linda was around then. She left home when I was 3 and she was 17. And so I didn't really see her for a while. When I was 9, I started going down to they had a summer camps in California. And so I started going there. And I mean, it's a hilarious story. The first time I went, I I went on, I had to fly, and I live in Canada. She lived in California. So I get to the Vancouver airport. Of course, back then, does a 9-year-old have identification? No. Did we need passports? No. And I get to, and of course, the airport was really different. And I hear this paging happening, and it said, could Mr. Hood come to the whatever customs or whatever? And I'm like, Mr. Hood, I wonder if that's me. I mean, I'm 9. So I walk over to the customs agent. And as I'm walking over to them, I hear them one say to the other, I wonder where Robyn Hood is. And the other one said, oh, probably in Sherwood Forest.
Yeah.
So then I said, are you looking for me? Well, I didn't know I had to pick up my luggage. I was only 9. And then they're like, what are you doing traveling alone? And I go, well, I'm going to see my sister. And so they thought I was running away from home or something. Like, yeah, a 9-year-old gets a plane ticket, a return plane ticket, and they're running away from home. So, I mean, those were long days before the, unaccompanied minors had thing. Airplanes were kind of old back then. I mean, it was a long time ago. And so, so I started going in the summers to spend time with Linda. And then when then I went and spent some time in California when she had an instructor school, and I taught there, and I was involved. And then, Linda was always doing things that were outside of the norm. In terms of the horse world, they did studies on rear facing trailers, and they fed kelp to horses, and they did everyday wormer, and they did a lot of things that now are fairly common, but at the time they were pretty much out there. And so when Linda took the Feldenkrais training, I had the opportunity to, Moshe Feldenkrais taught that training. And I had the opportunity to spend a little time there. And Moshe actually put his hands on me and told me where I, fractured my back and all this kind of stuff. So I was thinking, okay, it's interesting that Linda's into something else. Because when I spent time with her in California, she went off on some different journeys of her learning things. More of a spiritual kind of journey. And I sort of held the fort a little bit at the ranch. And so then I started to see what she'd done, because you have to understand that in the horse world, she was already training horses without force. Already doing that. And that's the only way I grew up with horses. That was just kind of what we did. Now, she didn't have all the techniques that she had, but it was always about thinking of the horse. There was not running around the horse and all those things that people do. And so then I went to Equitana with her in 79, when she was first kind of demonstrating the method. And then I started bringing her to Canada to do workshops and so on. And then I started teaching it. So just made a lot of sense to me. And then I mean, it was a very interesting transition, because of course, her being the oldest sister, I was the only one that could maybe question sometimes things she did. And then she'd give me this kind of look like, who do you think you are? She couldn't get rid of me, that's, that's the thing. So, and I have to give her a lot of credit, because she, over the years has been, even if she's really thought about things that I've had to say. And there's been lots of times that I question what I do, and I think people should question what they do. I think they shouldn't take anybody as a guru. They should take everything they learn and have their own personal sieve that they put it through to say, is this reasonable? Does this make sense to me? Is this okay with me? Does it feel okay with me? And that I wish people would do that when they're looking at people. Put no one on a pedestal, because there's no one worthy of that in terms of any human that you're going to learn from.
Yeah, it was amazing. And yeah, Linda, her whole life, she was so ahead of the times, wasn't she, with
Totally.
what she was doing with the horses. And then even I feel in the dog world, because the whole kind of philosophy of TTouch, of that, the empathy, the respect, the communication, and it feels like it's more of a hot potato more recently, all that stuff about feeling safe and the emotions of the dogs. But you guys have been doing it for donkey's years already.
I know there's so many things. Well, even, the whole concept of body work on horses. In 1963, she and her first husband wrote a book called Physical Therapy for the Athletic Horse.
Wow.
So if you think about that, it's been so long. And she has constantly sort of evolved what she's doing, and made it more learnable for people, because and I think that's so I'm happy that there are more and more people. I kind of have to laugh sometimes when people come up with some like things like it's new. It's kind of like, okay, but great, it's good. And I think the dog world, in some ways, the dog world is further ahead than the horse world. There's still a really prevailing kind of um thing in the horse world of just make them do it. But I also find there's a polarity, and I don't know, sometimes this is a little hard to sort of come to terms with that. So in the horse world, if someone had written, oh, if you're using a wand, it's aversive. And there is that balance, because it's like, how do you we don't hit horses with wands, we stroke them, we do whatever. But there are lots of people that are pretty not that. And so it becomes a balance for people, that if it's sort of this extremism of kind of one thing than another. And I remember something that Chirag Patel said at one point, is he said he doesn't consider himself a force-free trainer, because there's no way that you can be well, come on, we put a collar on a dog. Is that not an aversive?
Yeah.
It so depends on our point of view of what we do and what we consider to be okay. And I think that's where the whole balanced trainer thing comes in. And what I remember, I had a lot of them a lot of people that had gone through the training in Australia, because it's been going on for a long time there. And what the people that took the course said, it's so dependent on their who was leading the course. If they had a sort of a bias towards using, positive reinforcement, then that would be taught more. But unfortunately, there was a more aversive side taught. And I swear, I think we have to consider the sort of our personal morality of what we do. And that's why I think it's important for each of us to really look at, I don't care, as I say, I don't care who it is, what are they doing? Does it make sense? Is there a consistency with their philosophy in terms of, is what they're saying and what they're doing the same thing? What happens when it's not going well? Do they just do more? Or, can they stop? Can they change what they do? And I do think that the dog world is better at that than the horse world, I would say, at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'll ever change, to be honest, because because horses are big, people are afraid of horses. That's to me a huge thing. And, that's our whole basis, that aggression comes from a place of fear. And that's the same for us. If we're afraid, we're going to respond in an aggressive way. Same with a dog or a horse.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And if you looking back over your years of teaching, how have you seen the TTouch method evolve?
I would say I would say that there's more paying attention to the dog or the horse, whatever it is, um, doing less, more pauses, realizing that it is in the space, the learning takes place, even though we've known that it takes place in the pause, and that we have to do a lot less than we ever thought to actually elicit a change. And I think, yes, we can change things and make things happen and so on and so forth. But I feel like in order for change to be taken into the body, that the spaces are really important. And I had that shown to be so clearly when in this last trip to Australia. I went to help a woman that has 2 7-month-old warm blood colts, and they've never been haltered. And they're not, like, as youngsters, she scratched them and she could touch them, so, but they've never had their feet handled. They've never been haltered. And so I said I would come and help her, because something I've done for a long time. And So what we do is we put them in a smaller space. She didn't really have a very suitable space the first day. And then we use the wands first kind of in the air just a bit. And we always, always leave them an escape route. So it's never about cornering them or, pressuring them so that to do that. So anyway, I did sort of 3 short sessions with these two young horses, and one was a lot easier than the other in terms of less nervous. After we finished, I was going to go back the next day. I did go back, but they slept. Those young horses went and they laid down and they slept, and then they were sleeping the next day, and she said they've never slept like that. And so we didn't do anything. I actually gave them, I did something with them on the Friday, I guess. And then I didn't do anything Saturday and Sunday. So I gave them 2 days off, and then I did more with them, and they were really, really receptive after that 2 days, like sort of much, much easier because they'd had a chance to process it. So I think so I think we do less. For me, it's about giving more freedom rather than restriction. That's the same with the horses, but it's like, the things we have, like the beeline and things that are like that space between being on and off a lead, and helping people to think about having influence versus control. I think that's, and that whole thing of giving direction versus correction, and containment versus restraint. So I think that there's been a, more and more sort of movement into that. And I think giving them the time, I think the pause has been something that we've really developed into longer and longer.
Amazing, amazing. And I just out of interest, because I've lost count, how many TTouches are we up to now?
I was just thinking about that, because that's another thing. So and one of the sort of really unique aspects of TTouch, and I think it's one of the reasons that people don't understand it, the power of it as much, is that TTouch was used with human or dogs and horses, and then came to humans. Other modalities of body work started with humans, and then they were taken into animals, so people could feel their own personal benefit from it. And so what's happened is, as it's gone into humans, that there have been more and more touches added, because people would say, when Linda was doing TTouch for You, they'd say, oh, well, I have a sore back, for instance. And Linda would say, well, is there a way that you can use your hand so you can reach it? And so they found a way, and then they made it another name. So I'm not 100% sure how many there are. I have to count them at some point. There are many. And what would happen is, so often when we were doing this, the chart that we did, and Mandy, put all the animals up, doing the mind map, Linda would say, oh yeah, but we can only use that on humans. And then I'd show somebody it, and they go, oh no, I could use this on my dog or my horse or whatever. So there's not necessarily everything, but there are lots of things that most of the things are kind of transferable to one thing you're doing. And a lot of it depends on how people feel with their own hands. That's the other reason for having a lot of different touches, is if you have, for instance, really loose ligaments, so your joints collapse, then the clouded leopard's going to be the hardest touch for you to do. So how can we find a touch that you can do that is going to be comfortable for your animal? And that's kind of the other way that TTouch differs from most forms of body work. It is, and that's why it's that really doing it with them, and also with the person. And people will find that if they find ways that are comfortable for them, it actually helps them as well.
Yeah. And it's just as important for us to be in a comfortable position, and no tension in our body, and we're supporting our arm on something so that we can then do the touch, so how we are and how we feel, and how relaxed our arms are is also super important compared to actually what we're doing with our dog as well, isn't it? So
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then that's why we can feel better after doing it. Because I know a lot of
mm,
people that do different forms of body work and they get exhausted. And I would say that for me, it's the opposite. And it's so there's a reciprocal experience in a way that happens that I found really beneficial. And I had a really nice woman come with a dog. She has PTSD and now so does her dog. She got this rescue dog. And I think a golden doodle, something like that. Really, really lovely dog, really fearful of people. And she wasn't sure about coming. And so because it's a long day was a long day for her. And so I just said, listen, come as long as you want and leave when you need to. It's okay. And so she brought this dog, and the dog was like very skeptical about, people and so on. So nobody went near the dog. We just guided her through a few things and so on. And I showed her some touches to take home. And of course, by the third day, the dog is really coming up to people and so on, because nobody forced it on her, and she got a chance to see that we're a bunch of safe people, even when though we had some kind of barky dogs there that were a little reactive, didn't bother her. And so she's sent me back some feedback to say that her dog has changed so much, but so is she. Like she said, it's helped her so much with her struggles, and it's given her something that she can really do. And I think that's another huge benefit of the TTouch is, again, it becomes this reciprocal. And she asked me a really great question, and she said, did I honestly think that it was fair for her to have her dog become a service dog? Because that's what she was working towards, considering the dog's background. And she works with a really wonderful trainer who had recommended that she come on the course, who trains these, for this particular type of service dog. And I said, first of all, I think that you will be a really strong advocate for your dog, and you will know, and so will the trainer know, if it's okay for your dog. And I think the biggest thing is for her to just, the fact that she's aware of that is super important. It's not that the dog is doing something for her, it's whether it can be mutually beneficial. And I was really touched by that. But she sent me a few videos, and it's really nice to see how much her dog has just opened to people being okay. And I think that's the other thing is, we're not interested in, like, I don't want dogs to think I'm okay. I want dogs to, can they find a way to think, humans could be okay?
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, with when I took Chloe on my little rescue, she was so shut down, bless her. She'd been so badly abused. She was absolutely petrified of humans. And all I've ever done with her is TTouch, nothing else. Just start in that one little circular touch, the back of my hand, and gradually building the trust with her. And I think it was about maybe 8 months after I'd had her, something like that. I'd been medically retired from the police, going through my own PTSD stuff. And it was giving me something else to think about, supporting her and helping her. And then they used to sleep in their beds on the floor in my bedroom, her and Keto. And then one night I woke up after a nightmare, and there's Chloe looking down at me. She'd
Oh,
never
wow.
jumped on the bed before, do you know?
Wow.
And it scared the life out of me.
Right? Is she going to eat me?
She's got this, she's white and she has this big black nose and big black eyes looking down at me, and I was like, oh my God. And
Yeah.
yes, she promptly jumped off, and I was like, I'm so sorry. But it then became this thing that she was actually supporting me with when I was having these nightmares and stuff, and she was curling up and supporting me. So it was kind of like, well, I healed you, Chloe, and now you're giving it back in return. And you know, I know that you can train the dogs to do that kind of stuff, right? But I didn't do anything. It was just this bond that we'd created
Yeah.
between each other. Really very, very magical. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, If people are absolutely loving this and they want to learn more about Tellington TTouch, either as a dog owner or as a dog professional, where can they find your online courses?
So our we set up, because of COVID, we set up a platform, learn.ttouch.ca, and we have some free courses there, and we have some very specific sort of courses on specific topics. Tony actually Shelburne has done some great courses. We have an immersion class that is for people who want to be practitioners, but also people who just want to really learn more to help their animals. And I do, I do some live Zooms and that are always recorded, and then they have an online portion to the course. And then I will be back. I'll be back in the UK, and I think it's in April that I'll be doing something live. And I'm hoping that there's more people that are out there that are doing in-person workshops. It's been difficult. I don't know if you started to do in-person things again, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do it pre-COVID, the workshops
Yeah,
anyway. So,
yeah.
post-COVID, yeah, I've run a few workshops, but yeah, it's difficult.
Well, and I think it's a challenge because money is an issue for a lot of people, and then the travel and taking time off and then having to have a place to stay and so on. So I think in some ways the online has been really helpful for people. I know that we get a pretty close community that really support each other, and they kind of feel safe that way, and they can feel comfortable. Their dogs aren't. We people miss that in-person interaction, of course, but we have to only do what we can do. So I do think that because you have quite a few people that you also do the same kind of thing, support them online and so on, don't you? And
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's been, I mean, that's why we have a fantastic practitioner in India, Sanju, who has learned it all online and had many, many dogs to practice on. And she has enhanced the life of so many dogs that it's really super rewarding. And that's the biggest thing, is we just want to, spread this work as best that we can.
yeah, definitely. And let's just go back to the in-person training in April in Somerset. We've got what have we got? 3 days of dogs.
Yeah.
1 day with small animals, which is just like a really cool day.
Yeah,
Uh,
exotics, mostly exotics, actually. I mean, not your average pet for the most part.
no. And what were those little monkey things that we did this year with the long tails?
The lemurs.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, they were amazing.
was so cool. They were so
And then
cool. So,
those dogs, I can't remember what they were called. I need to ask Tina. You know, the little white
oh,
dogs.
the white
I can't,
ones.
yeah, but I can't remember what they're called. They look like Eskimo dogs that in molt, but
Yeah,
they were like they were very cool. Because again, it was that you do a little bit and then you don't. It's just doing a little bit to show them that you're not going to be having to treat them, because that's part of the problem with animals in exotic type animals, is most of the time they're only ever handled to do something to them. And so
yeah,
if we can't, but anyway, that was great fun. It was great.
yeah,
And they were fabulous at the college. And then I'll do 3 days with horses this time. They had, it was a fantastic facility.
yeah. And even, I'm not have no intention of training to be a T-Touch equine practitioner, but I've did the horse training as well. And my goodness, how beneficial is that to then take that information and learning back to dogs as well? It was just sometimes having like that bigger thing is much
Yeah.
easier to then go, let's just reduce it down to a dog size. So,
Totally. And I think, I mean, I have to say personally that I've taken so many things that I've learned with horses that I know about horses and taken them to dogs. And I've taken many things that I mean, the body wraps, for instance, actually ended up coming from dogs that we took back to horses. That one of our practitioners didn't have whatever and used a horse wrap on her dog. And that's actually how it started. And I also love that aspect of this work, that so many people try things and share them, and then
mm,
the work kind of expands. So it's not like this is how it has to be. It's, can we take these ideas and the ways of doing things and thought process and take them into different species. And when you work with a species you know nothing about, you have to throw all your beliefs out the window. And I think that's the other thing that is fantastic. You know, it's like, oh, you can't do this with this. You can't do this. You can't. And that just goes out the window. So
Yeah,
that's fun.
absolutely awesome. And I've got two more questions. Over the years, you've obviously worked with like a load of different animals. What was your most favorite or memorable?
Oh, that's a hard question. Hmm. That's a very, very good question.
See, because I seem to remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a photo of you with a koala.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool. That
And
was
I
cool.
was like, that must have been really cool because they look really cute.
They do look really cute. Well, I actually I think that working with that koala was probably one of the most the koala's response was probably one of the most unexpected that I've had, because people watching it, like koalas tend to really hang on to whatever their a tree, whatever it is, and this koala just went like limp, and the legs went down, the arms went down, and all the things that I was doing, they going, oh well, they don't like their feet to be touched, and I'm doing touches on the bottom of his foot that's relaxed, and then they don't touch like their bellies to be touched, and I'm doing touches on the belly, and this, like I had people who do rescue, who's one person said she watched the video 10 times and she could not find one time that she would say that koala was in stress, because koalas will die from stress and shock. So it was interesting, and I've never touched a koala before, so I would say that was one of the softest, cuddliest. That was kind of interesting. I think some of the snakes have been really interesting. They're not as cute, but I think they've been it's been interesting to see the response in them, and even if it's just to momentarily give them a different experience with humans. I think
Hmm.
that's is something. I elephants are kind of interesting. We were once at a we went to a, it's a kind of a zoo, but it's a different kind of zoo in near Vancouver, and there were these white rhinos, and they all came along the fence, and we were, so we went over and we started doing some touch on these rhinos, and they something suddenly startled them, and they just all took off, and then they came right back around and stood again. They're not handled, they're just, something about it. So I always find it surprising and just so interesting to see how it seems like it's a different connection. I think animals are just so much more intuitive. I was thinking about your dog actually, with Chloe and her response to you. And I think the only reason that dogs in particular, can be trained, quote unquote, to, mark, identify, illness and so on, is because that they're so intuitive.
Mm.
No,
Yeah.
we just have to give them so much credit for what they put up with humans. And, it's, they're, they're, they're just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one's going to be a tough one.
Okay.
What's your favorite TTouch and why?
Oh, that is a hard one. Um, I I wouldn't say that I have a favorite, but if I was to think about what I most commonly sort of drawn to. Hmm. See, it's one of those, it really depends on the situation, right? Because if I'm just meeting any animal for the first time, it is the contact that I make, I would say, is pretty much always with the back of my hand. And so there'll be, and sort of this momentary contact. One of the touches I love to teach to people, and I probably use it a fair bit, is the zebra, because it takes people out of their habit, but not so far that they can't do it. You know what I mean? Like and it can be so it can be so much more acceptable to some animals, especially if they're a bit suspicious about, sometimes a circular touch can be a little bit too much intention behind it for some dogs. And so we can do casual that and, kind of some of the troika things. But the reason it really depends if I'm working with, because there'll be a way that I start for an introduction, and then depending on the issue, like if it's a inflammation or something like that, then I'm going to probably go to one of the circular touches. And that can really make a difference. I did hear something really interesting that I'm going to just share with you, if I can just find it for a moment. On when I was at the horse training in Australia, we were talking about doing the infinity circle in the air. This
Yeah.
kind of, you could call it a lazy eight in a way. And so there was somebody there who's been studying, oh, come on, she's been studying symbols and things like that. And so I just have to find this because I found it so interesting. It comes from a book called Biogeometry Signatures, Harmonizing the Body's Subtle Energy Exchange with the Environment. So I thought that's an interesting book.
Who's
So
that by? Do you know?
it is by Ibrahim Karman. Is Karim.
Okay.
And so about the infinity sign, the infinity sign releases the stress caused by past memories. In general, any visualization related to the present or future will not cause stress as it flows with the current of time. Looking backward in time is like swimming against the current of time and causes stress. This stress is there even with the happy memories. By visualizing or wearing the infinity sign when going backwards in time, the pressure and memories become more a source of supportive when you go forward in time along the timeline. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of sometimes the response that you can see when people even do it in the air. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Awesome. Robyn, I could sit here all night chatting with you, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor, and I am so grateful to have had you here today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was really fun to talk to you. Thanks for doing this.
You're very welcome. Very excited. Thank you. Take care,
You're
everybody.
welcome.